Well, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Hope you're enjoying the show. It's 20 years. I've been here actually since the beginning of this, believe it or not. So I'm kind of dating myself. I'm on one of these postcards out here, and I said, at least I'm not on the post office. So my name is Gregory Goll, and I'm currently the manager of medical imaging services at WellStar Health System in Marietta, Georgia. And what I want to talk to you today about is fundamentals of project management. And a lot of this ties into, there's one group called Project Management Professionals, Project Management Institute, which has a PMP certification, which I had started at one point. I'm going to finish one of those off. But a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is just about the generic project procedure and also how not to have a pitfall, because there are as many ways as there is to do a project. There's as many ways to derail one. Let's be an ornery here. Which one? The sneak. Hang on one second.
Sorry, that one. Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Middle button. Okay. So I always love this slide, is because it basically the biggest flaw in executing any project is one word: communication. And so what the customer said that they wanted, how the sales rep understood it, how the solution management wrote the requirements, how the developers coded it, how marketing described it, how the project was documented. Everybody can believe that one. What services were implemented, how the customer was billed, how it was supported, and what the customer really needed was just a simple tire swing. Laser pointer. Hang on here. Megan. Not sure what happened here. Yeah, let me push forward here. Okay, is it okay if I wing it here? Okay, so we're gonna wing it a little bit. So as I said, not everything goes right in a project. Not everything goes right in a slideshow. So one of the things I want to point out here, cost of project failure. Believe it or not, and this is, I just redid these numbers again, 70% of all projects fail. And by meaning fail, it failed to meet some sort of criteria that would have been considered a success. The average cost overrun of a project, 27%. So if you're considering $1,000 project, no big deal. $1 million project, big deal. 1 out of 6 projects has a cost overrun of 200%, and a schedule overrun of 70%. IT projects fail at IT failure rates are between 5 and 15%. And here's the kind of the shocking thing right here, and you're looking at it: $50 billion to $150 billion of loss in years. Only 2.5%, and this is a really one that should sink in. Only 2.5% of all companies successfully completed 100% of their projects. And I've been in this profession since 1985, and to be honest with you, I can count the amount of projects that never did. They may have been completed, but they were not completed to what they were originally designed to do. So we're talking about a project. What we need to do is consider the individual components of a project. Sorry if I'm locking you off there. So the first thing you need to do is initiate it, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, closing. And all these are pretty good definitions. There's a lot of resources online. Like I said, I'll tap on the Project Management Institute. But you need to understand there is a method to the madness. There really is. There's supposed to be. When you're talking about project life cycles, the phases that a project passes through from initiation to final closure. How do you know something finished? I always look at it as circular. Clock starts at 12 o'clock, goes completely around, the day finishes when it hits 12 o'clock again, 24 hours later. Every project that begins at some point, it has to end. Sometimes, unfortunately, it ends the wrong way. and the phases are the milestones of the project. So some of the things and this is another pitfall, stakeholders. It's any group that basically has a financial outcome in a project. So in the case of where my life is now, I'm medical imaging. So ultimately, the success of a project is getting something done on time, because we shoot pictures, images, which means that every time that we're doing on schedule, one of those basically scans or whatever it is, we're generating revenue for the hospital, and conversely, we're able to, in a timely manner, diagnose the condition for the patient came into. So sponsors, and this is something else to always remember, a person or possibly a group of people that provides the resources and support for a project. So before you even tackle anything, I always call it the field of dreams. If somebody comes up with you a field of dreams and says, I want to do whatever, reinvent the wheel, who's going to pay for it? Great idea. You know, so and that's your banker. And so anytime you change something, you have to let the person know who's funding you that there is going to be probably very rarely do you come under budget, unfortunately. I think the only famous one I heard was the Mackinac Bridge in Michigan in 1959. Project manager, this is something a lot of people don't actually invest in, because what a project manager does is you could look at them as almost like the gatekeeper who controls the process or controls all the different pathways. Because if you think of going down I-75 on the way in here, there's 4 lanes of traffic. The last thing you want to do is have somebody weaving in and out and smashing into every car. So the project team, it's groups of individuals that support the project manager. And the thing is with a leader, and even in my case, I've led a lot of projects, but also you have to know there are other people that they may have a different stake in the project where they need to be the leader. And the best thing you can do is you stay in your lane and do whatever tasks you need to do to support the overall project manager. Project scope, the work done to deliver a product or a service. And basically this is the baseline. And one of the things like right now I'm going through is a lot of the academic stuff. What I want you to do is start setting, when you get into a project or somebody brings something up, focus on there is a method to this. And you'll sometimes have to explain it to people that it's a great idea. I just can't do this in a day. It really means that if it's going to take a month in the IT world, a build of a new physician's practice, all the data you have to do, the integration, 4 months it may take. And that's a project I actually had at one of my hospitals. And so some of the resources you're thinking about, the easy stuff is money. You know, what do you need to do a job? The biggest resource I've ever had in my career is my people, or the people I work with. Materials, data, and relationships, because part of it, your relationship is not internal, also internally as externally. When I deal with a vendor, I always have a set of expectations. And it's just a matter of when you make a relationship with a vendor on the first project, usually then what will happen is subsequently, even when the other vendors deal with, oh, I worked with Greg at whatever hospital, and I know what the expectation is. They expect this timeline. They expect this. So none of it's never meant to be negative. It's just setting the base ground rules. And so as I was saying here, redundant, vendor communications need to be consistent. And one of the things is however you set, I call kind of the rules of engagement, however you relay a message to a vendor, don't do it verbally. Or if they say something, never accept it verbally. Or if you do accept something verbally, send back an email or something that says, hey, by the way, did I understand this? Because it's amazing, because there's an old saying, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. And good example of, boy, incoming inspections. How many people have had challenges with incoming inspections? See a few people nodding their heads here. You know, The initial inventory, I know there's a, depending on which company it was, we even had warranties that started at the point of where the devices actually came off of the dock at the company onto the truck weeks before it actually released, before it reached its final destination. And some of that you don't even find out until way after the fact, but that's where you read your documentation. You know, like I said, I'm just breezed over timelines here, why they're important. Some of the software, a lot of people don't use software, believe it or not, to do this. And I've just pulled some statistics, and the vast majority of companies don't use a single set of project management software. I know even at one of my companies, they said, why do you need that? I said, because if Philips Medical, and I'm not picking on Philips, if Philips Medical is using Microsoft Project and they're giving me a thing called a Gantt chart, which is a chart that tracks all the projects, if I don't know how to use that same software, I'm at a disadvantage to even keeping up with them. Now this is one that many, many years ago, and this came out of a place I used to work called Erlanger. And we had a project manager, Gary Orrell, and he was fantastic. About every Wednesday, we would have a meeting and he would drop a timeline right here. This was on the board, and we knew exactly what every project was doing. We could see across the board. Everything that was going on was beautiful for somebody like me as a supervisor. I knew where I had to commit my people. And I also knew when stuff was going to arrive and when the expectation was that this was going to be done. Risk analysis. Now, depending on who you work for, risk is a big thing because usually risk is associated with money. I've worked at institutions that have a high appetite for risk, and currently we're more conservative at WellStar. They're not really, they prefer like even supporting devices, making sure that they're taking a cautious approach to how they do things. So I know that when I come up and I say I'm interested in doing something, I already know basically what type of risk my bosses will handle and put forward. And you know, basically also there's no such thing as a project without a risk. And some of the craziest things, I could almost do another 2-hour class on just things I've seen go wrong with a risk. So the importance of meetings, documentation of progress, assignments. I'm going to breeze over these a little bit because I got a lot of slides. This is actually normally a longer presentation, but I didn't want to delete a lot of the stuff out of here. Critical path. This is a big deal that will throw you for a big monkey wrench. The sequence of activities that define the longest path through a project. Why it's important. Any process that interrupts a critical path will have a global impact on a project timeline or success. So this could be something as simple as a flooring delay for an MRI. MRI is on its way here. All one's removed, the flooring company can't make it for 2 weeks. Given COVID the last 2 years, how many vendors couldn't make it in your hospital? Raise your hand. We went lockdown for about 90 days. And so all of a sudden, wow, that was something I never anticipated in my career. Scope creep. This is something that is really, what happens is you start with, remember I used that first slide about the swing. All of a sudden somebody decides this is a great idea, and I've had this before. We're going to create a 10-bed ICU. You know what? If we knock out that wall over there, we can make 15. Can you do 15? Well, maybe. How much more money is it? Well, just can you do 15? Well, we have to have more network connections. We have to have more. Now we have to talk to IT because our switch was maxed out. We only had 10 spots. So all this all of a sudden becomes a serious money issue. And also the bad thing about it is every time you change something, it ties somebody up. And I've had something as simple as demos where somebody will go, all you need to do is attach it to this wire and it goes to PAX. Famous last words. 5 hours later, we still don't have it worked out. And this is something else that happens. Sometimes change happens from like a management standpoint. So one of the things that I've learned in a career that there's a whole group of people above me that are looking at strategic access for patients, potentially. What can we do to better serve our, especially in Atlanta? For everybody know, there's 4 real big players around Atlanta for hospitals, and we all compete with each other. I made a joke with the guy from Piedmont, Steve Kelly. We were the biggest healthcare system in Georgia. We have 11 hospitals. They went out and bought 6 more. So first thing, hey, how's it going, Greg? Yeah, we've got 17 hospitals now. Oh, yeah. And so scope change, why they did was they bought hospitals to gain more market share, just like we did. And some of that stuff will change how you are doing a project in your current location even. Compression, oh, these are the fun ones right here. Compression, maintaining all the aspects of the project, only somebody says, by the way, we need you to get that done 30 days earlier. So we want you to do everything, but we need to mash it that much closer. Depending on what you're doing, sometimes it can be done. Crashing, I don't really like a technique used to shorten the schedule of the least incremental cost by adding resources. That's, you ever heard the old say, just throw people at the job? Sometimes it works. Other times, like let's say if you're doing an inventory of a hospital and you have a group of people, let's say they're trained professionals in our field. Somebody says, I want this done in 30 less days. You go out and you hire Regis. Now the catch is, they don't know that this isn't a heart monitor. They don't know that this isn't a heart lung machine. And then all of a sudden when you get the data back, you go, holy cow, I got the job done, but what did I get? I got twice the work because we got it done on time, but the quality went down. And there's fast tracking, you know, performing tasks in parallel. That's what I'm saying. When you're walking across that Gantt chart, if you tell people, can you accelerate your lane? The catch is a lot of times you can, but also you don't want to cross into other people's lanes unless they need your help. Oh, dysfunctional. Has anybody been in a dysfunctional hospital? Don't raise your hand. You're on video. So the technique used to ensure success is not an option. And I've got one of the statistics at the end of this I'll read to you that I just downloaded about how many times this just people walk in and say, this is doomed. This is never going to work. This project I've been called into within, if you're in the keynote address, within that first 30 minutes, a group of people will go like, nah, we're toast. We're done. This is not going to happen. Acceptance criteria. This is a big deal. Because every time you accept something, especially equipment, there's usually some sort of monetary tie-in. Maybe 80% upfront to order the equipment, 20% on acceptance. Determine, and this can also come to bite you because in my first career, we had a call forgiveness. We were opening the biggest hospital in the country. One of the things we caught was our nurse call system was supposed to be modular. They hardwired it with wire nuts. We said, oh boy. So one of the punch lists we had was, you have to go back and make this all modular. Then what happened was we opened the hospital, everybody did the fanfare. Great, 1985, we opened it up. All is forgiven. One of our directors said everything that was deficient on acceptance criteria, 90% of it, don't worry about it. High five, see you later. 10 years later, we were out running 16-hour shifts, rewiring the whole hospital nurse call system, creating a module. We actually bid the project because the company that did it didn't exist anymore. Planning, understanding the project scope, timeline, a lot of this we've already touched on. Routine update to people, update the times that are scheduled. Building a project budget. Some of the budgets I've had, some of the people, actually one of the people in here that I've worked with before, I remember I got a call in the afternoon, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they said, we want you to build an emergency room for our place across town. I said, cool, where's the blueprint? We don't have a blueprint. go down to our existing emergency room, come up with a budget in the next 24 hours to build kind of sort of the same thing across town. And I was like, kind of, sort of. So did it, but also I did do it at list price. I projected my money out, because I said, this is probably not going to happen. Like they said, it's going to happen in 3 years. I was right on. So what happened was it did come to fruition as the original design. And I did luckily, and I use the word luckily, stay within my budget because I had banked on this wasn't going to happen. Build it to, okay, short-term projects, the start date and the funds are available quickly. I have that quite a bit. As found out last week before I left, guess what? We're getting a new CT over there. I knew we were replacing one. See the PO come flying across, cool. I knew we needed, I just didn't know it was going to be within the next 30 days. Build it to fit. Oh boy. If you have existing buildings, the amount of money renovating a building that was built in 1970. Or in the case of several of the places I worked, one hospital was built in 1926, one was built in 1938. So what's the big thing between 1920, that area? Think of what a computer was in 1938. What computer? It's one of those things you used to slide across with the beads and go like, I'm doing my counting this way on my calculator. Make sure before you even start, if you can, find out what they have for money, because I've had this happen several times. I remember my hospital hired a cardiologist, and I came back around after meeting with them. I said, what's the budget for this? They said $180,000. And I said, I just talked to him, and you better add a zero. Because cardiologist needs stress test systems, nuke med cameras, and all of a sudden they went, oh. I said, yeah. Has a scope been determined? Did you add everything you need in the budget? That was the best example. The cardiologist. We got reception area. They had all this stuff for a lovely little family practice doctor's office, not for cardiologists. When can you get the money? So that goes back to some of the acceptance criteria too. How much money is committed upon arrival? How much money is due to the final approval? This is a big thing right here. Blueprint control. What you have to do is every day we would go out and we would have, or not every day, but once a week, we would get a call out that says, come get your prints. Everybody had to come out, and we were always making sure that whenever there was a change at one hospital I worked at, everybody had the same set of documents. So project notebook, this is what I was saying real quick about when you look at everybody's plans, this is what, when everybody would turn in, everybody would have to go back and mark their prints, and you'd make sure you had the right date revision. Whatever you do, if it's documented hard copies, I used to keep some of these around, project notebooks, because I could just pull one out and take a look at it. Software is much better. It's a lot less heavy. Before you volunteer for something, there's no saying, never just say, I can do this. Make sure that you have the bandwidth to do it, whether it's you personally or your team. And communication, it's not only what you say, it's basically how you say it. And you heard that from our keynote address person. If you walk in and you've always had this attitude of, I can never get this will never happen, this will never get done. This last project I did with you was a dismal failure. That kind of sets the bar for the next project you have with maybe your administrator or a certain area. And the next project may be a total success, because why the last one failed was not because of anything that they did, it just was not properly supported. Internal department budgeting, make sure you've taken care of yourself. I've got a couple of those going on right now. Can my people support this? By the way, this is above and beyond what, if we do this, we can't do that. Who's going to pay for the labor of this? And in one case, what was really nice is we were able to backbill our labor back to the project. So it wasn't adversely affecting my budget. So every time there was an hour over, all the overtime went directly against the project, which made it so at the end of the year, you didn't have to explain this massive variance. Oh, this is my favorite slide. These guys are my bookends. And what this was, these are, believe it or not, core drills for one of my projects. And what happened was we went to General Electric went and said, we need core drills. And the first thing my engineering facilities department said, you are not going to drill into our floor. We control that. I said, no, that's not what we asked. We just said we need a hole. And they said, we control that. So one night I was working late and I heard this call out that communications went down for the 9th floor. Communications went down for the 8th floor, 7th floor, 6th floor. And I was like, wow, this is weird. It's all IT. And, this guy might remember that. And what happened was that little hole right there was stuffed with wires. And what happened was when they drilled through, that was all the telephone lines for each floor of this hospital. And when I realized what had happened, I said, surely to gosh, they didn't leave the cores up there. Lo and behold, guess what? As soon as they pulled them out, the wires, drop them on the floor. So you can imagine the mayhem that this happened. Everyone's pointing, who did this? And it's like, they're supposed to test the floor before they drill. It's like the old saying, measure twice, cut once. Don't cut through things. And so the lessons learned, taking an inventory of both what went well and what didn't. If you think everything went perfectly, it didn't. Take a look at it, take a look back. And it's not a matter of, occasionally some of my group would always say, can't you ever say something positive? Like, for the whole thing that we did great. And it's like, we did do great, but here's things that could have went a little better. And good experiences can be built upon. Bad experiences, it helps you avoid the same issue. Because if you can't, there's an old saying, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result, it's not going to happen. And I've never been embarrassed to share not only my successes, my team successes, but if something went wrong, I'm always glad to say, hey, this is how and why this didn't go as planned. And the lessons learned, lessons are dynamic. As this process continues, all these serve as building blocks for future projects. The project I did at the University of Michigan in 1999 was a foundation replacing the biggest monitor replacement in the country in 1999 was at the University of Michigan. There were a lot of things that went fantastic. There are a lot of things that went horrible. In fact, horrible to the point of we had a vendor basically protest. And accidentally, one of our purchasing people let all the confidential documents out the door. So we ended up, about 4 people in the country that were doing the same projects ended up in this massive lawsuit against one of the vendors because we all kind of picked this one monitor for the same criteria, but because the vendor realized that all these hospitals went the same way, their market share went in the toilet. So their goal was, if you just change your data, we'll go away. And I think we heard that with COVID. You just change your data and everything's good. Unfortunately, in life, once if you base things on facts, that's something that you have to stand by. Before any work begins, have a plan on exactly what's being done. Know what you're doing and know the boundaries. Do not become the system administrator for that whole new network you just put in. I can't tell you how many times somebody said, we just need to put you to put in the users. That's all we need you to do. Oh, by the way, can you now control that? So all the nurses come through you. No, that's not going to happen. But once you start that bar of saying, oh, I can do it once, then once becomes your new job. And guess what? You're not paid for it. And also, do not make time promises you can't keep. Also, I always say in life, have a contingency plan. Anytime I get into something, I have a plan B. Because I assume I hope I never have to use my plan B, but I always assume I'm going to have to. Oops, I think I kicked back one. Oh, common pitfalls here. You purchase the equipment or software without anybody's input. I have one of those right now where somebody bought a wonderful imaging device 3 years ago, stuffed it in a closet we never knew about, got a call on the phone and said, move this over from this site to this site. It's like, move a what? You know, we didn't have any POs or anything. So somebody bought it. Now we're going to use it 3 years later because the doctor's over in our area. But, you know, buying something, I always call it kind of the shiny object, or you might want to call it a squirrel. The doctor says, I want this. If you buy me this $500,000, I remember my Slurpee machine, which was a prostate freezer. It sat next to my laser because I was a laser specialist. And the only person who touched this prostate machine that was $500,000 was me, because I had to get the damn thing out of the way every time I had to do a laser surgery case. And it sat for years and years and you couldn't even make a Slurpee out of it. Eventually got retired. Not taking the time to properly verify information. Oh boy, another good one. Not taking the time for physical measurement verification. Yeah, will that CT fit in that room? Did you measure it? Got a blueprint? How tall is the ceiling? You know, making changes without proper approvals. This, you know, some more, like I said, these are the ones of the stay alive ones for you guys. Deliberately working outside the area of responsibility, unfunded equipment replacements, consignment. This was one that, oh, we need 50 IV pumps. We need 50 IV pumps. We're going to only budget for 10, but we're going to come up with some creative way of getting the other 40. But you just, in some cases, like in a couple of hospitals I didn't even know. You can't do, they don't like consignment. There is things you do, like everyone's familiar with DVTs or SCDs, where those are always consignment. Everybody knows that. But some of the stuff you can't do that. Interfacing non-compatible equipment. I just mentioned that with my imaging tech. Just this will go right into your cath lab. Easy peasy. Guess what? That demo that we were doing never happened. And they said, well, you just go out and buy a switch for it. Me buy a switch? Well, you can pay Philips to do it. You know, who are you talking to? I don't have any money. All right, so 5 ways to get it done wrong or not at all. Scopeless is hopeless. You don't, you know, basically don't decide what you're doing. Just throw money at the problem. You know, money fixes everything. I work on high performance cars. No, it doesn't. It just means you pour more money in it. Focus on time and cost, not quality. Get it done yesterday. Never let anyone spend money. Don't waste time checking anything, just get it done. Know the right thing to do. Don't analyze the problem. Don't listen to an expert. And absolutely above all, whatever you do, be sure to ignore the customer. Never go back to the customer and say, is this what we're doing right? Don't launch a project if you didn't know everything. You know, and what does anyone else know? Don't thank the team, push them harder, because that's the worst thing you can do. Like I said, I'm kind of critical on my own stuff, but I'm always grateful to my team, because I always look at it, I am nothing without the people behind me. Don't waste time planning. You know, how many people build a house and don't have a floor plan? People ought to know what to do. How many times have you heard that? Oh, we're installing this. You guys have done it a dozen times. You know what to do. Avoid big problems. All of our projects fail. Remember I said that? Everything fails. And we've got no time for them either. We're just too busy putting out fires. And that's another thing that a lot of people, my departments over the years have gotten a lot of recognition, plain and simple, because we don't look at something. If somebody needs help, I remember years ago, one of the best things we ever had was something as simple as a bed interface. Some beds disappeared. I listened to it in a safety huddle. Anybody go to a safety huddle every morning? I heard bickering between nurses and nurses and nurses about, we can't do this, we can't do this, our patients can't, we need to find all this equipment that's gone. We fixed the beds in my world when I was up in Michigan. The CEO turned to me one day and said, Greg, can you fix this? And I said, well, it's going to take a few hours out of our day, but I think I can fix this. We went through this whole hospital, figured out where the missing components were, got them redelivered, done within an hour, and we were heroes. And the only thing we didn't do is we didn't complain. They identified a problem, we just fixed it. Was it my scope? No. Did it matter? It mattered to my patients. So before I get to the questions, I want to give you some of my little horrifying facts here. So, remember on that first slide I was using? 70% of all projects fail. Yep. The dollar figure as of just a week ago, $50 billion to $150 billion on the IT projects, dead on. Who knows IBM? Ever heard of it? Sharp group of guys. 40% of projects that IBM has done failed to meet the company's 3 goals: schedule, budget, quality. And you know, IBM, when you think of IBM, they're like the gold standard. 3/4 of projects fail, and this is common, because senior management doesn't get involved. Think about that. 80% of high-performing projects have somebody like a certified project manager that's keeping everybody in their lanes. Only 2.5% of the companies, like I said, successfully completed 100% of their projects. And that's something I want to keep in your mind. This is, 2.5% is dismal. If you're a baseball player, you're in the game tonight, if you only hit, say, 0.025, you'd be out of work pretty quick. 77% of high-performing companies understand the value of project management. And basically, there's about, I'm looking for the stat, but there is about 17% of all projects will fail in a manner which will imperil the future of the company. So they set down that path for whatever reason, whatever the scope was. If this project fails, that company is no longer exists. So I appreciate everybody. Does anybody have any questions?
What kind of software do you use?
I used to use Microsoft Project, and so that's what I used. Anything else?
Do you guys do the equipment planning there as well? And if so, do you use any other software for that, or do you just
well, right now in the life I just switched to, which is the medical imaging, is our VP, because we've got our strategic planners. They are using a software, and we have a 5-year plan out of what, so we've got, I don't know exactly what software they use, but they definitely are using a software program. And they do have a good 5-year plan. When I moved into my job, I was kind of a weird hybrid, because originally this department for 15 years was run by a radiology tech, which if I broke my leg is fantastic. If I broke the x-ray machine, not so good. And so as I've been coming along through my world right now, it's been that whole paradigm shift of my job description. I actually said I was ARRT certified, which is I'm a radiology tech. And I said, no. You want a CBET, CHTM. That's what you want. You want somebody who has their roots in imaging and biomed.
So you do your equipment planning. So you're talking about like your 5-year capital plan.
Yeah.
Do you let your architects do the equipment planning?
Sure.
In our organization, we have our own project team that does the equipment planning. We use that software called Tenant. So you're planning for everything, whether it's a suction regulator, a mail stand, whatever it is for that particular room, you have it.
We're right now using there is, because of our the expansion we're going through, we have been using a 3rd-party company. And so Kelly, just pick her, Kelly Painter's like the person I work with. But we had some internal people. And during the COVID time, we had 2 of our long-term employees retired. But they were, it was kind of, COVID was irrelevant because they had been there so long that this wasn't a surprise. If you've been someplace 30, 35 years, if you love what you do, you keep doing it. If you go, I've been doing this for 35 years and I want to go bass fish or I want to be out in the ocean, more power to them. But they filled the gap and they've been pretty good on that. And they do all that stuff about, we do have routine project meetings on, like, we've got a linear accelerator going in, for instance, and one of the boring parts for somebody like me is I'll mute them when they're talking about where the tissue dispensers go and how much you need to order. And then I'll just wait until they come back around to me and I'll kick them back on again and say, okay. But we do have people that, we do have that, and we do have the software that does it. But like I said, right now, some of that does go through like that project planning group. And they've done a great job for us too. Anything else? Or like I said, in my first life, though, the person that not my first life, that'd be life number 2, where I used that one chart I showed you. They were very organized. The person who was a project manager, very organized, very direct. We had a nice infrastructure of everybody was there that, when everybody submitted their budgets, we had one person who basically shuffled the cards all together and made sure that everything, then they go through and make sure that you weren't missing something. And I always considered that was a blessing because, I very rarely miss anything because my stuff's usually big ticket. If you miss a stress test system, it's obvious. But missing what, chairs, garbage cans, all that stuff, that's where like we had whole groups that would do that. They would just, you're creating this room, here's the stuff that you have to have in this room. So we didn't have to worry about. Does that answer the question? Okay. Anything else?
One thing that I've observed working on projects, especially imaging projects, is the lack of infrastructure. They plan into them. So like you bring in like an outside contractor and they look at it as a commercial, like build, and they don't take into account like all the devices that need electrical. And for a lot of stuff, say like an EP lab, it's got to be isolated electrical. You can't have a lot of. Do you run into that where they build something and then they go, wow, we don't have enough outlets or we don't have enough data drops?
Well, I did run into some of that, I'll be honest with you, because like in some of the projects we did when I came in is I'm a big person for power protection, because one of the things at one point where I worked in one hospital I worked in, I always consider we were 90 minutes from help. We were in the middle of nowhere. We are a level 1 trauma center. We need to, anything we design, we need to make sure that we're making sure if something goes wrong, a tornado or something, we've done everything prudent to make sure our power is protected. You can't, protect against anything, but when I moved to my current job, I remember we built a beautiful health park. I was doing my first tour there. I'd only been there about 90 days. And the first thing I looked at, I was looking at the CT. I said, where's the UPS? Well, the building wasn't designed that way. So they didn't make a provision for a UPS. And I said, oh. And so the first thing that happens is, that always worries me is, in the short term, you saved a few bucks here. But in the long term, we had a couple times, if you're in the Atlanta area, a lot of the storms we've had come around here, especially like around the airport, we had some catastrophic power failures where I had everything from basically $30,000 repair on a CT because of around Atlanta Medical Center South, which is down by the airport, because of things like that. When they built but that wasn't something that was modern, that was something legacy-wise. It was a Tenant Hospital. If you've ever dealt with a Tenant Hospital, the one thing that they're good at is being cheap. And obviously, you'll know they'll never hire me, so. But, that's the things that I try to protect against. And so, and also I've had tit for tat, I'll be honest with you, in my career between facilities and stuff like that, where they say, we've built this building, we've done everything on this power, we are above and beyond anything else in the region. you don't need a UPS. The old saying goes, bullshit. Because, one time you quench a magnet, and that's been one of the issues. I think one time in my prior career, during a new install, one of our magnets quenched. And for instance, I just got rid of one that was one in our physician's practice that they, when we bought the practice, it was a dormant, kind of a dormant magnet that they were maintaining, and it got hit by lightning 2 years ago, and nobody ever realized it quenched. And so I was tasked for getting rid of it. First thing I walked in the door and I said, this thing's cold, it's not running. Or it's, well, we call it warm, because the helium's gone, what makes it cold. So that is a challenge, and it's kind of a shift of mentality to go like, yeah, you're spending more money for something, but why? What's the risk versus the reward? The immediate reward is I save a little money. The risk is somewhere down the line something catastrophic happens, and there is stuff you can't prevent. I remember a toilet overflowing on top of one of my CTs around 2002. What can you do with that? Well, you shouldn't have put a CT under a toilet, would have been the first thought. Second thing is, it was in an area we had, in fact, I did have that one with my newest CT, Christmas 2 years ago. They plugged the toilets in the urgent care in one area. This is a brand new urgent care area that was a brand new building. It backwashed all the way to our imaging area that was shut down for Christmas. So somebody came in and literally is, no pun intended, they had an old crap moment, because guess what was flooding back on the floor? And so we had to completely lift the CT off, clean the room, and it's those things that you can't, there is some things you could do to mitigate that, but it happened to be the perfect storm where this one area shouldn't have been used during that time frame, but because it was Christmas and you're trying, a family member goes back there and people are unfortunately flushing things down toilets that shouldn't go down toilets. Then they keep flushing, and then eventually, fortunately we caught it before it actually hit the CT itself, but it went right in the trough. So all of our wires were submerged, so we had to replace because it's biohazard. So those are some of the things to watch, and you can't predict that. That was like how far was that down the hall? Another 50 yards. So even if you walk that area, you'd be like, there's no way that the sewer is going to back up that way. Anything else? So I'm just like everybody else. I have the failures you do. Or maybe I have worse and I'm just lucky. Oh, well, thank you for attending.